Part 119. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1181. Chapter 1181. It's time to give up. These words touched Li Lao's heart, and he responded, I have thought about this in the past 2 days, but it is difficult to find a breakthrough. The pressure on that person is too small, and it will not work. It is easy to do bad things if you go too far. Just halfway through speaking, Jian came in angrily from the door. Li Lao and Lu Haiheng were both surprised. Li Lao quickly asked, what happened? Jian finished the matter in one breath, and then lowered his voice and said, Second uncle, we can no longer take care of these refugees. We usually pity them because they have no fixed place to live and are far away from home, and we have never treated them badly. Unexpectedly, they are the ones making the loudest noise now. Our Li family is not lacking in this merit, but they can't do it without me, the Li family. Simply find an opportunity to abandon this job, teach these refugees a lesson, and also create some trouble for those in the palace and court. Save them from being too idle and focusing all their thoughts on plotting against our family. Li Lao and Lu Haiheng looked at each other and both smiled. Li Lao took his nephew to sit down and said, I was a little worried when I told you Uncle Lu about this just now, but I thought you gave me a good excuse to come back. I will immediately write a sick leave note and send it to the Yamen. You will also ask for leave. No one in the court cares about the Quanzhou Foreign Affairs Department anymore. They are all fighting for power or Mingji Bao. Jian nodded and responded hurriedly. It should have been like this a long time ago. Everyone still thinks that our family is taking advantage of a thankless job. Let's see who takes over in the future and who will have a headache. Immediately, Li Lao asked people to prepare pen, ink, paper, and inkstone. Li Lao's official position is now in the Department of Husbandry, and his family is in the Department of Personnel. After the book was written, Zheng He took it and set off with a smile. Lu Haiheng also said, as long as the family has a countermeasure, I will go back and talk to my old man first so that he won't worry about it. Okay, Li Lao said with a smile, when the matter is over, I will ask Fu Niu to steal 2 jars of good wine and have a drink with him. Now, I am sick, so I won't send it to you. Lu Haiheng smiled and cursed, didn't care, waved his hand and shook his generous shoulders and left. The weather is hot, and the cicadas on the trees are lazy and no longer sing without straining their necks. The willow tree at the door of the Hubyu Yamen has its branches hanging listlessly, and 2 equally listless clerks are leaning on it below. When Zheng He got off the carriage, the 2 of them looked over and greeted each other with smiles. Hey, why is little brother Zheng here? I didn't see my uncle coming today. Yes, brother Zheng saw that we were working too hard, so he sent us food to relieve the heat. The 2 of them were half joking and half hoping. After all, among the official families, the Li family was the most generous. Whenever Mr. Li comes on a business trip and brings something to relieve the heat at home, everyone can benefit from it. He didn't want to, but Zheng He waved his hand, I'm sorry, brothers. I will bring you something good next time. I'm in an emergency this time. Our uncle is sick and he sent me to ask for leave. Hey, what's going on? Is it serious? The clerk asked with surprise and concern. Zheng He shook his head and replied, the weather is too hot. Our uncle has been taking care of the refugees outside the city all day, so he collapsed. After chatting for a few words, he hurried in. The department of Hubyu is a large yamen, with people coming and going, and small matters such as asking for leave are not handled personally by important ministers such as the minister or the minister. So, Zheng He handed the leave application form to a doctor who was responsible for attendance and left. He rushed to the Libya Yamen and did the same thing. The difference is that because the person is unfamiliar, the clerk stuffed a dime of silver into the door. In this way, Li Lao and Jian put aside their problems and stopped caring about the refugees, and such a big thing was easily accomplished. Outside Zindu city, the thatched shacks were bustling with activity, and porridge was boiling in big iron pots. The refugees were holding pottery bowls and chatting together, instead of stretching their necks and looking into the hut. The village chief only wore a coarse cloth gown, a straw hat on his head, and a cloth hanging around his neck, which he pulled up from time to wipe the sweat. Occasionally, when villagers came to ask questions, he would shout a few words, screaming until his voice was dry and hoarse. Just when he was looking for a place to drink a few sips of water, Zhengwu arrived with a few boys. "Grandpa, the village chief, my uncle has given orders." Zhengwu held the old village chief's arm, found a quiet place and talked carefully for a long time. The old village chief slapped his thigh excitedly and cursed at the top of his voice, "That's it, everyone is going to be so angry. If the master hadn't given the order, we would have wanted to go home and stop serving these white-eyed wolves." Having said that, he couldn't wait a moment, so he turned around and went to find the villagers. "Everyone, put down your work and quickly pack up all the things we brought home. Let's go home." "Go home?" All the villagers were puzzled, and someone asked, "Uncle Village Chief, are we done here? Are we going to go home and not come back again?" The village chief nodded heavily, waved his pipe and pot, and shouted, "Originally, this job belongs to my uncle. We came here just to help. We didn't get a penny in wages and even gave him a lot of good things. Now my uncle and the fifth young master are both tired and sick, and no one is grateful, so we won't do it anymore. We will go home and go to our fields when we have the strength, and we won't have to serve anyone anymore." The villagers' eyes widened when they heard it, and they all understood. "Okay, go home quickly." "Yeah, I've long been homesick. It's so close, and I don't even have time to go back and take a look." "That's right, we don't get paid, so why bother running here?" As he spoke, everyone dispersed and began to stir. Wood barrels filled with water, wooden carriages filled with barrels, pots and pans, tables, chairs and even pots for cooking porridge were all brought down. As for the half-cooked porridge in the pot, pour it on the linoleum removed from the shed. In short, whatever the village brings, regardless of whether it is used or idle, take it all away. The hundreds of wounded soldiers didn't know what was going on, so they came forward to ask. The village chief took them back to the village directly. There is no shortage of food for them, and it would be better to have more people to protect their homeland. The refugees didn't know what was going on at first, but they finally came to their senses when they discovered that the people and soldiers in Broken Gold Beach were about to retreat. Someone asked loudly, "Where are you going?" "No more porridge, we haven't eaten yet." The man from Broken Gold Beach was also a good talker, so he fought back at that time. "We are not your parents, we don't care whether you eat or not. Aren't you amazing? You talk about the world with your mouth shut, then just take care of your own stomach." The refugees became extremely anxious when they saw that the temporary camp was quickly becoming empty. They got together and blocked the carriage's way, and some even tried to things away. "No, you can't leave. What will we do if you leave?" "Yes, weren't you brought here by that high-ranking official named Lee? You follow the court's orders to take care of us, you can't just abandon us." "Yes, yes. If you dare to leave, we will sue the Yamen." Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1182. Chapter 1182. Harming others will ultimately harm yourself. It's a pity that everyone in Broken Gold Beach is not afraid at all. You can go wherever you want to complain. We are not from the court or the Yamen. We just came to help because our uncle took the job. Now our uncle is so angry that he fell ill. Who still spoils you? They are just a bunch of white-eyed wolves, they eat people's food and don't own them. If I had known you were like this, even if we were feeding the pigs with our grains and vegetables, we wouldn't have given them to you to eat. The mouths of the old and young men in Broken Gold Beach are not just for show, they are working in their hands and not even a word of curse is left behind. Some refugees were still sensible and asked loudly, "What are you talking about? Who made Uncle so angry? We never talked to Uncle at all." The village chief shouted to the villagers, those who got on the bus, and those who got on the bus, and the guards who escorted them. Then he turned his head and sneered in response. "What you are talking about these days is that Princess Kangal, who is about to be sacrificed to pray for rain, is only a teenager, that is our uncle's niece, the apple of our Lee family's eye, and the owner of Broken Gold Beach." With that, he waved his pipe, and the convoy set off for home. The refugees didn't speak for a long time, looking at each other and feeling a little stupid. "Aunt Jong, what princess did you say yesterday that you wanted to burn the people praying for rain? Is this the master of these people?" a woman asked the temporary neighbor next to her. The temporary neighbor was frightened and waved his hands quickly. No, I was just joking, and I also heard what Jong Daswin said. He said that if it rains earlier, he can go home earlier." No, I heard what others said." The man named Jong Dashuan also refused to admit it and also pushed it aside. "It has been pushed back and forth like this, everyone has said it, but everyone also listens to what others say. It just doesn't matter who the source is. People have been offended, and no one cares about them." Some refugees were smart and took a bowl to secretly fill the half-cooked porridge. As a result, someone saw him and robbed him too. The refugees who had just been arguing in a group immediately started grabbing like crazy again. Only a small part of the porridge and soup went into the stomach, and most of it was lost in the fight. Some people were hungry, and in a moment of confusion, they grabbed the bags of food. The few clerks assigned by the household department used to just drink herbal tea in the shed and get their wages by watching others working. Now that everyone in the Lee family has evacuated, they are the only ones left. Before they know it, the refugees have turned into a mob again. It is simply impossible to live. They couldn't stop him, and they didn't dare to stop him for fear of losing their lives. With no choice, they could only run back to report the news. The doctor at the Ministry of Finance was drinking tea leisurely, and suddenly he heard the news from the little official who ran back, and he realized that a big event had been delayed. He immediately found Lee Lauer's request for leave and ran to find the minister, who then found the minister. So, in the middle of the afternoon, the prince and several important ministers were discussing matters, and the news that Lee Lauer had directly given up his son came in. Before everyone could say anything, news of the city defense also came. It turned out that the refugees who had grabbed the food ran away, and those who had not grabbed it were afraid of starving in the future, so they clamored to enter the city, and the city gate had been surrounded by water. Those in the city cannot get out, and those outside the city cannot enter. The commander of the city defense shift was afraid of something happening and did not dare to take responsibility, so he also reported it. At this time, several important ministers frowned and were unhappy. Why did Mr. Lee suddenly become ill and cause chaos outside the city? Yes, even if you are sick, you won't have to withdraw all the people. The prince lowered his head to drink tea and said nothing. After thinking about it for a few times, he guessed the purpose of what the Lee family did. There was a flash of light in his eyes, but when he raised his head, he frowned. After several important ministers finished speaking, the prince hesitated and said with a bit of helplessness, "Originally, those people were just villagers from Sujintan, but they were acting under Uncle Lee's orders and were not arranged by the Yaman. Now that Uncle Lee is sick, they all went back to take care of him, which is understandable. However, something happened suddenly and the refugees were left unattended for a while, which is why trouble broke out." Hearing this, several important ministers looked at each other with mixed feelings. The prince grew up in Sujintan, so he should accommodate Sujintan and maintain it a little more. This shows that the prince values love and justice, and it will be a good thing for them to ascend the throne in the future. But at this moment, it is helpless to put this emphasis on love and justice here. Finally, several important ministers discussed it and sent a minister from the Ministry of Household Affairs to visit the patient. Of course, the visit to the doctor is a lie, and letting Li Lauer and the Li family take over the refugees again is the real thing. The minister was a little reluctant at first, and usually looked down on Li Lauer's background. Now he deigned to condescend to beg Li Lauer. How could he be happy? Then, "What, Mr. Li is very ill and doesn't see visitors," the waiter was sitting in the carriage, dizzy with heat. Hearing what the servant in the Earl's mansion said, he was so angry that his head was smoking. The servant at the Earl's mansion smiled and responded, "Yes, sir, our uncle is indeed very ill. He can't even open his eyes. He really can't see guests." The waiter wanted to curse, but after thinking about it, he swung the car window and turned around and went back. The prince and several important ministers were spitting after hearing what the minister said, scolding the Li family as if they had committed some heinous crime. Several important ministers all had headaches. Li Lauer was really pretending to be ill and completely gave up his job. Even if they knew this was false, they couldn't pull him out of bed and force him to continue taking care of the refugees. It was the prince who listened to the minister's chatter and said something directly. "Since Mr. Shilang said that taking care of the refugees is just a trivial matter, Uncle Li should not be so irresponsible from now on. Mr. Shilang, please take over the refugees." The waiter was stunned at that time. His mouth could be opened wide enough to stuff an egg in. He was so regretful and confused. How did such a hot potato fall on his head? He wanted to say something else, but the prince added, "Don't worry, just as the Ministry of Household Affairs allocated money and grain before, it will do the same in the future. There won't be a grain of rice or a penny missing." The egg stuffed into the waiter's mouth immediately turned into gall. He is the minister of the Ministry of Hubyu. Of course, he knows best how much food the Ministry of Hubyu will allocate. There is simply not enough food for the 10,000 or 20,000 refugees outside the city. In the past few days, Li Lauer tried his best to beg alms from various houses in the city, and even the prince took advantage of them, so that he could barely feed the refugees. Now it's his turn. What should he do? Let's not say that the unlucky minister harmed others but ultimately harmed himself. I just said that because Zindu Pier is outside Zindu city, there is no curfew restriction, so even if night falls, the wharf is still busy. The hawker is working hard to sell the remaining fish and shrimp, hoping that a buyer will appear to mark his business today. There are also enthusiastic waiters in the tavern, shouting and soliciting business. "We are new to Xinghua village, don't miss it if the wine-loving gentleman passes by." Several urchins were wearing half-length trousers, shirtless, and were as tanned as loaches, running around on the street. Occasionally, passers-by were bumped into, and they couldn't help but laugh and curse. The urchins didn't take it seriously and continued to play. One of them looked up at the distance of the pier and suddenly shouted, "Oh, what a big boat!" Everyone heard the sound and went away. In the dark twilight, a large sea ship appeared in front of them little by little, like a giant beast that came out of ancient times, with a ferocious look. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1183. Chapter 1183. An excellent opportunity. The huge crossbows standing high on the bow and sides of the ship are as cold and cruel as the fangs of wild beasts. It seems like it can be launched at any time, nailing all enemies to the ground. It only took a few breaths for everyone to go from surprise to panic. "Run, it's a bad guy." "Is it a pirate? I saw it, there was a cyclops on the ship." Run quickly and report to the yamen. The pier that was bustling just now was crowded with people, and suddenly it was completely empty. On the contrary, there are countless people hiding in all the taverns, tea houses, and shops, as well as in the alleys. This is the Tianwu man who wants to watch the fun but is afraid of hurting himself. On a large ship, a big one-eyed man with a leather goggle and an eye patch, wearing a coarse cloth waistcoat with his chest hair exposed, yelled behind him at the top of his lungs. "General, we are here, even these people in Zindu are too cowardly. As soon as I show my head, they will all run away." After saying that, he laughed proudly, looking even less like a good person. Someone in the cabin responded loudly, "It's not that I'm timid, it's that you look too scary." The one-eyed man patted his chest hair and protested unconvinced. "The general is just jealous of my tall, strong, and mighty appearance," little Kuir said, "she likes men like me best." The group of men guarding the crossbows next to them were also rough and tough men. They laughed loudly when they heard this, and the sarcasm was completely merciless. "Xiao Kui is a woman full of flowers. She says she likes anyone who gives her money, only a fool like you takes her seriously. That's it, if you have the ability to marry a lady and make people like you, try it." "Humph," the one-eyed man curled his lips disdainfully, not caring at all, "you are just jealous. Xiao Kui is not a woman who loves money. Besides, I can't stand those delicate ladies, every word scares me. If you shed tears, let's forget it." With this laughter, the big men did not have the first awe and strangeness in Kyoto at all. "Who are these people? Looks like a pirate, but he is not busy getting off the ship to rob. But if it's like the Navy, it seems like there are no rules at all." Fortunately, the dock was very close to the city defense camp. After a while, the soldiers from the city defense camp came over. Perhaps they were really afraid of pirate invasion, so there were 300 people, all armed with sabers, occupying a powerful position on the pier. The person leading the team is a deputy commander. He comes from a family of military generals and is somewhat capable. At this moment, he was standing on the dock shouting, "Who is that person on the boat? Come out and say something." After a while, two people actually appeared on both sides of the bow. A tall, handsome, and tough man. A tiger with a round body, a shrewd smile. The soldiers didn't recognize him, but the deputy commander shuddered when he saw it. He straightened his back subconsciously and stood in an orderly manner. "Li Jiyi. That burly man is Li Jiyi. Li Jiyi, who ran thousands of miles back to avenge his sister because she was bullied. Think again about the rumors on the streets today that Princess Kangol is in danger." The deputy commander's face turned pale. "It's over. The purpose of Li Jiyi's return this time is self-evident. Li, General Li, why are you back? Do you have any military orders?" The people on the bow of the boat are none other than Li Jiyi and Lu Yang. Hearing this, both of them sneered. Li Jiyi held the animal head on the bow of the boat, his eyes full of anger and ridicule. "How could it be that this commander actually knows me? I thought everyone in Zindu had forgotten how sharp my sword is. Otherwise, how could I bully my sister again?" The deputy commander was embarrassed and frightened, and didn't know how to respond. Lu Yang, on the other hand, played the role of a good old man as always, and added with a smile, "Commander, don't mind, General Li just likes to joke. Commander, don't be nervous, we are not coming back this time for official business, we are just here to visit relatives. This ship belongs to our family, and the people on it are also our own, but this ship has always drifted on the sea before, so it inevitably needs some means of self-protection, such as these crossbows. There are also these men who often kill pirates, or simply surrender from pirates, so they look a bit tougher. As long as no one provokes us, these crossbows and these hands will definitely do no harm to anyone. Self-protection. Tough. Don't provoke, don't hurt others. The deputy commander's mouth felt bitter after hearing this, and he was complaining crazily in his heart. This is obviously to seek justice, or to shock. Who can not worry, who can not care? But he didn't dare to say anything. He exchanged a few casual greetings, left his soldiers to guard him at a distance, and quickly went to report the news. So, Li Lao originally gave up his son, and the refugees were still rioting without resolution. The prince and the important ministers heard the news that Li Jiyi came back with a pirate ship in a fierce manner. The important ministers are all good people, and they tacitly proposed to report the matter to the emperor. While the prince was still hesitating, the emperor appeared. How could an emperor trust someone else wholeheartedly, even if that person was his son? In the past 2 days, on the surface, the government affairs have been handed over to the prince. In fact, the emperor is well aware of every move of the prince and his important ministers. At this moment, he couldn't sit still due to the continuous threats coming from the Li family. What are the Li family going to do? Do they want to rebel? The emperor slammed the table and said harsh words, making all the important ministers lower their heads. The prince quickly poured tea and served it, and persuaded, "Father, I have asked the emperor to conduct a brief investigation. The Li family has devoted all its manpower and material resources to take care of the refugees in the past few days, but the refugees have spread rumors and want the princess to sacrifice her life to pray for rain." Uncle Li, who was so conscientious and talented, fell ill and gave up his errand. As for Li Jiyi bringing the ship back, it stopped at the dock. No one on the ship disembarked, presumably because he did not want to cause unnecessary misunderstandings. Misunderstanding, the emperor snorted coldly, not listening at all, and cursed, "He is threatening me if he dares to do this. The Li family is sure that I can't punish him." When the prince saw this, he could not say anything, otherwise he would be blamed. Several important ministers wished they were not present, as they did not want to get involved between the Li family and the emperor, or in other words, they did not want to get involved in the contest between the Marquis of Xinting and the emperor. At this time, Dingbi heard the news and hurried over. In the past few days, he has been secretly mobilizing people and spreading rumors all over the sky. He is very proud of it. Just now, he suddenly heard that Li Jiyi had returned with a ship of pirates to support Princess Kangol. He jumped up happily. Good opportunity, excellent opportunity. If done well, not only can the Li family be eradicated, but you can even gain some real power for yourself. As soon as he entered the house, he fell to his knees and shouted loudly, "Your Majesty, the Li family is really too rebellious. There are over 10,000 refugees outside the city, and Li Yisheng just threw them away. He didn't care about the safety of Xindu or your safety at all. Now Li Jiyi has personally brought the thugs back with the intention of coercing you. This is a serious crime and cannot be forgiven. I beg your order, immediately mobilize soldiers and generals to arrest Li Jiyi and the thugs, and ensure peace in Xindu." Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1184. Chapter 1184, Killing in Public. Okay, the emperor glanced at the prince and the important ministers. Compared with them, it seemed that the Marquis of Dingbei was loyal. He immediately issued a secret order and asked Dingbei to mobilize 3,000 troops to the riverside military camp. Dingbei was allowed to do everything expediently. Dingbei Ho almost went crazy with joy. This last sentence was enough for him to move forward and take over all the military power from Jiangbei camp. By then, even if Xinting Hao defeated the barbarians and returned in triumph, Jiangbei camp, his old home, had already become his territory. Just thinking about Xinting Hao's face made him want to laugh out loud. Let these people look down on him, but in the end they lost to him. With all the pride and expectation, Marquis Dingbei led more than a dozen soldiers to protect the 2 young eunuchs who delivered the order, and hurried to the dock camp. But things often backfire. The better the thought, the crueler the reality. In the dock military camp, the soldiers fed the horses, patrolled, and trained in an orderly manner. Suddenly I saw an edict coming from the palace, and soldiers immediately reported the news and went in. Li Daong personally arrived at the gate of the camp. As soon as he saw Ding Bei Ho, he knew that something was wrong. Sure enough, after entering the main tent, Ding Bei Ho sat down on the main seat with an air of dignity, as if he was the master of the house. Li Daong's eyes flashed, and he said with a cold face, "Master Marquis, that's our Marquis seat. Please take a seat next to us." The Marquis of Dingbei was proud of himself, and his expression turned bad when he heard these words. He responded, "This will be my position soon." "That's right away, not now, Mr. Marquis, please get up." Li Daong was tough and refused to give in at all. Marquis Dingbei wanted to open the table angrily, but looking at the imperial edict in the eunuch's hand, he decided to endure it and wait until the matter was settled before dealing with Li Daong. So he got up and left the main seat. In the first round, Li Daong won. The generals who rushed over after hearing the news felt relieved when they saw it, but they were more worried. "I am afraid that all the children in Zindu now know that the one in the palace had a falling out with the Marquis, and that the other one no longer trusts the Marquis, and does not even mention such a big thing as the Northern Expeditionary Army driving the barbarians out of the border. Sending an enemy like Marquis Dingbei here so suddenly today is obviously not a good thing." Sure enough, they unfolded the imperial edict, and everyone knelt down to receive it. After hearing a few words, their faces changed. It's okay to mobilize thousands of people to arrest the gangsters, but why is the gangster Li Jiyi? And that sentence, Dingbei is allowed to act expediently in all matters. Could it be that after the peer camp, it will be decided by Biu to have the final say? When Dingbei saw everyone like this, he wished he could look up to the sky and laugh. Let these killers be proud of themselves and boast of their great military exploits, but in the end they will fall into his hands. Seeing that Li Daong was silent, they urged in a low voice, "General Li, take the order." Li Daong still didn't speak. Ding Bei Ho couldn't hold his anger and cursed, "Li Daong, do you want to resist the decree?" Li Daong stood up slowly, but responded with a stern face. "We will not accept this imperial edict." "How outrageous!" the and Marquis Dingbei shouted almost in unison. The who delivered the order looked horrified, but Dingbei Ho was even more excited. Li Daong showed no fear at all and continued to speak steadily. "The wharf camp has always been under the control of Marquis Inting, and we only listen to Marquis Inting's orders. Even if the court dispatches orders, we should inform our Marquis first, and then our Marquis orders the dispatch of troops." The who delivered the order still wanted to win over, and persuaded, "General Li, you also know that the Marquis is at the border in the north, and it is impossible to issue an order. Even if you have to inform him and send the order back, at least 5 or 6 days will have passed. And the thugs are at the dock outside Zindu." "It's too late," Li Daong shook his head coldly. "I'm sorry, father-in-law, we just listened to Master Ho's orders." After saying that, he took out half of the military talisman from his arms, put it on the table, and said, "The other half of this military talisman is with the Marquis. When the military talisman is completely put together, I can send out troops. Also, we won't be able to tell whether this imperial edict is true or false. What if some people tamper with it privately and are tempted to frame it, and then detain one of us to send troops privately with the intention of treason? Wouldn't we have no room for reasoning?" The was speechless. After all, it was his first time to question the authenticity of the imperial edict. But Dingbei quit. Li Daong clearly suspected that he was obstructing him. He glanced at the military talisman on the table. This was something he had been thinking about for many years. It was so close, but he still couldn't get it. He couldn't help but feel a little anxious, and he directly put the saber in his right hand. Li Daong didn't know what he thought of. He walked behind the table and blocked everyone. After rummaging for a long time, he finally said, "The Marquis did not leave any additional letters, so we can only act in accordance with the order." After saying that, he actually stepped forward and patted Bei Ho on the shoulder, as if he was very familiar with it, and persuaded him, "Master Ho, it's not that I don't look down on you. You have been a coward for half your life, and you have no ability at all. In our camp soldiers and generals are all tigers, and even if you try your best to seize military power, you still can't control them. Finally, why don't you be laughed at by everyone and go back to Zindu to be a watchdog?" He was talking and laughing, but his words were too heart-wrenching and insulting. Dingbu's eyes turned red when he heard this, and his back teeth clenched. For some reason, the faces that flashed before his eyes were those who had laughed at him. He took a deep breath to calm down. Unexpectedly, Li Daong got out of the way again. The military talisman seemed to be glowing, tempting him all the time. His mind got hot and he jumped forward and grabbed the soldier talisman in his hand. Everyone was startled. Before he could speak, Li Daong shouted loudly, "You dare to be the Marquis of Dingbei, and you dare to the military talisman. Damn it!" The sharp long knife almost fell down with the words. "Gilialu." Dingbei Ho's head rolled out instantly, and the blood from his neck spurted out 2 feet away, splashing bright red all over the table. For several breaths, everyone was frozen in place as if by magic. In the end, what happened? Why did everyone's head fall to the ground? This is the Marquis of Dingbei. No matter how incompetent he is, no matter how he is not favored by the Holy Family, he is still a dignified Marquis. Died like this? Died. The who delivered the order was timid. He twisted his neck like a machine and wanted to say something, but he couldn't make any sound at all. Fortunately, Li Daong was kind and wiped the blood on Dingbu's knife clean from his clothes, and said to him with a faint smile, "My father-in-law, when you go back to see the emperor, you must tell the truth." Marquis Dingbei went crazy and snatched the military talisman. "This is a mortal sin. I am afraid that it will cause chaos, so I will kill him and eliminate harm for the country." The made 2 sounds in his throat, rolled his eyes and fainted. At this time, several generals finally came to their senses and shouted loudly, "General, how can you kill someone? Do I need to see a doctor? What should I do?" Everyone was panicking and didn't know what to do. The soldiers of Dingbu outside also heard that something was wrong. They leaned at the door and looked anxious. "Master Ho, Master Ho." But the ones who moved faster than them were Li Daong's soldiers, who knocked these outsiders to the ground and tied them up in a few seconds. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1185. Chapter 1185. This is rebellion. By chance, the was choked awake by the generals. When he saw the fate of the soldiers, he really wanted to faint again. But Li Daong stopped him. "Okay, father-in-law, don't faint again. You serve the emperor and you didn't steal the military talisman. I won't do anything to you. But remember, you must tell the truth when you go back, otherwise I may have to reason with you about my temper." The almost peed his pants, his head was clicking rapidly. Li Daong waved his hand, and the soldiers moved away from the door. They crawled out and rushed to the entrance of the camp with the young eunuchs who didn't know what happened. He is also considered dedicated, and he has never left behind the imperial edict in his hand. Several generals and lieutenants looked at Dingbu, whose body was separated, and at Dingbu's soldiers who were outside the door. Their faces were as pale as paper. "General, you have caused a big trouble. What should I do if the Marquis is not here?" "Yes, General, send people to the city quickly to find Uncle Li and the princess to see if they can cover you up." "No, no, You'd better take the people north quickly. Everything will be easy to talk about when you see the marquis. I have to say that several generals and lieutenants sincerely considered Li Daong and gave them all the solutions they could think of. But Li Daong didn't care. He called his soldiers to put the body of Dingbiu in a box, and then threw it together with Dingbiu's soldiers outside the camp gate. Just wait for someone from Dingbiu's house or the court to come, and then take away these living and dead people. Everyone, I know you are doing it for my own good. But I did not kill Dingbiu on a whim. I have wanted to kill him for a long time. He snatched the military talisman and gave me a good excuse. Naturally, I can't miss it. Have you wanted to kill him for a long time? Several generals and lieutenants grinned after hearing this. Li Daong didn't wait for them to ask questions, sat down at the table, and even poured himself a cup of herbal tea, drinking it slowly and talking slowly. You should all know that there are rumors in the city that the princess is going to be killed and sacrificed to pray for rain, right? It's the beast Dingbiu who is behind it, and you can guess who his master is. The few generals and lieutenants did not respond, but their faces said everything. The only person in the world who can make a marquis act as a lackey is the one in the palace. Li Daong snorted coldly. The marquis and the fourth general have been working hard outside with their brothers for more than 10 years, especially this year to fight the barbarians to the death. How many grains of rations did the court give at such a critical moment? It was our Li family who begged our grandpa and grandma to borrow it from others, so that our brothers would not have to fight against the barbarians on an empty stomach. That's it. Even if that person is not grateful, he is still planning to kill our daughter of the Li family. This is really too much. Now we are asked to send troops to exterminate the sons of our Li family. What a dream! Do you think our Li family is made of clay? Let him kill us. Several generals and lieutenants sighed inwardly when they heard this. They didn't know about these things, so they cursed many people in private. But despite the scolding, they never thought of rebellion. Just now, he resisted the imperial edict and had no respect for it, and he killed the marquis. No matter where he goes, he will not expose it easily. They all have families, and clans. If they are implicated. As soon as he thought of this, Li Daong gave an order, and a dozen soldiers rushed in. I'm sorry, brothers. Today's matter is my decision, and I will bear the consequences. I have to trouble you to stay in the house for a few days. In this way, even if the court blames you in the future, it won't be too difficult for you. This can also be regarded as the end of our brothers and the end of the friendship that you have followed the marquis for several years. Several lieutenants and generals were anxious. They were afraid, but they couldn't hide like this. They blamed everything on Li Daong. Unfortunately, Li Daong did not listen to them at all and directly asked his soldiers to take action. When the room finally became quiet, Li Daong wrote a letter and asked them to send it to the earl's mansion immediately. Moreover, the was still in shock. He ran back to the palace in fear, and burst into tears as soon as he entered the door. The people who were shouting around him a moment ago have their heads dropped to the ground in the blink of an eye. Their eyes are wide open. Who is not afraid? The emperor and the prince looked at the crumpled imperial edict and the who was crying half to death with blood stains on his body. They couldn't believe it for a while. You mean, what happened to Dingbiu? He was killed. The kowtowed desperately. Kill, really kill. I saw with my own eyes how far the head rolled away. Dingbiu grabbed the military talisman, and when he held the military talisman in his hand, the head flew away. Flying away. General Manager Yi saw that this usually filial young apprentice was a little crazy, so he quickly took out a snuff bottle and went up to give him a sniff. The shivered and became much more awake. He was finally able to tell the story again, carefully and clearly, from beginning to end. Pa, the emperor immediately smashed the teapot and shouted loudly, "How outrageous, damn dog slave, how dare you resist the order and be disrespectful, you are rebelling, this is rebellion." The prince quickly stepped forward to help pat his back, and asked Manager Yi to chase away all the servants. Father, calm down, the dragon body is important. Everything can be solved, but you can't make yourself angry, my son and I can't live without you. The emperor was angry and was about to curse, but the prince added another sentence. I have just returned to the palace not long ago, and I haven't been filial to my father yet. My father can't be angry, and I can't bear to let him go. Regardless of whether this is true or not, this dependence and closeness really made the emperor feel much better, but he was not forgiving. You are afraid that if I die, no one will support you. The prince smiled bitterly, playing the role of a good son who was wronged by his father and could not defend himself. But after this interruption, the emperor recovered a little. The prince slowly served the emperor to drink tea and said, Father, there is indeed a rule that if the general is absent and the soldiers are not in compliance, they cannot send out troops. Besides, Dingbu is also a waste as a military prince. How can he the military symbols? Now that he is killed, there is no way to explain to him. Father, don't be angry. Marquis Xinting will withdraw his troops soon. When the time comes, Father will ask Marquis Xinting to punish these ruffians. Then you can take back the military power. This will save you from getting involved. Those ignorant people misunderstood that you are hiding everything. Horse Xinting is back. The emperor thought of his arrangement, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and the last bit of anger disappeared. I'm afraid the news from the north will come back soon. At that time, the military power will be taken away directly. Those people have no backbone, so they can't just let themselves go. The prince saw his father's expression in his eyes, but lowered his eyes, as if he didn't know anything, and then pleaded with full guilt. Father, when we were at Broken Gold Beach, we encountered difficulties twice, and it was Li Jiyi who rescued my son. The son always wanted to return a favor to him. If he doesn't get off the ship and does not hinder the safety of Xindu, can you please let him go for the sake of my son's sake? My son will tell the public that I asked him to find some treasures in the south to prepare for his father's birthday. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1186. Chapter 1186. Don't ever think about turning over again in this life. The emperor glared at his son, as if complaining that his son was soft-hearted and attached great importance to friendship, but in fact he felt more at ease with his son. Okay, I will allow you to make arrangements this time. But if the Li family does anything extraordinary, I will never be merciful again. Thank you, father. The prince quickly knelt down and kowtowed, and then asked Manager Yi to call the imperial doctor to take his pulse and prescribe medicine. The who delivered the order ran back from the dock like a lost dog. No one was blind, so naturally they all saw it and were full of curiosity. When he found out the reason, the whole city was shocked, and the ground trembled 3 times. Li Daong resisted the decree and did not respect it, and only listened to the orders of Marquis Xinting. Dingbua failed to seize power and was killed for grabbing the military talisman. I seem to be able to understand every word, but not all together. Has Xindu changed? The Northern Expeditionary Army is going to rebel? Nearly everyone immediately started to be cautious. Those who are looking at their daughter-in-law, wait a moment. Dandy son, hurry up and call back. The business is ready to close at any time. Send the gold, silver, and children to other places for shelter. Who knows when Xindu will become chaotic? Fortunately, the official news from the palace came out within only an hour or two. It turned out that the emperor sent an edict to the dock camp. Dingbei was so bold that he pretended to be powerful and wanted to seize the opportunity to seize the military symbols and control the Northern Expeditionary Army. Li Daong, the general of the Northern Expedition Army, killed Dingbei on the spot and brought the situation under control. In addition, Li Jiyi did not bring the pirate ship back to cause trouble. He followed the prince's order to find a heavy treasure for the emperor in the south to prepare for the emperor's holy life. To sum up, it means that the Li family's righteous teacher was well known, and Dingbei's death was unjust and he deserved it. Hearing the news, everyone felt relieved for the time being, whether they believed it or not. Only Dingbei's house can't do it. Without the pillar of support, Mrs. Dingbei Ho felt as if she was lying on a bed in heaven, crying so hard that she fainted. Marrying a husband as young as your father at a young age is just for the sake of glory and wealth. Now that a person has died, his glory and wealth have also disappeared, and he himself has become a widow. The numerous concubines and children of Dingbei were also panicked. With all the good food and clothing, no one could become a talented person. At such a critical moment, no one can take charge. Finally, the oldest concubine took the guards and stewards of the house and drove to the gate of the dock military camp. They cried and took the body of Dingbei and the guards back to the new capital. Originally, everyone in Zindu thought that Dingbei Ho's house was going to complain about injustice and seek revenge from the Li family. I didn't expect that Dingbei's children were so incompetent and all of them were cowards. Let alone revenge, I don't even dare to say a harsh word. Soon, Dingbei's funeral shed was set up, but no one came to express condolences. As a result, the cries of the Dingbei Ho mansion became even louder. That night, the eunuchs from the palace came to the door. Mrs. Dingbei thought it was the emperor who was supporting them. She almost crawled out and ran out, crying and complaining. Boo-hoo, our Lord Marquis must have been framed. The emperor is going to make the decision for our lord. Woo-hoo, your majesty is wise. The who delivered the edict glanced at her sympathetically, and then opened the edict. Relegated to common people? Distributed to southwest China? After reading the imperial edict, the entire Dingbei Ho mansion was in despair. Instead of making the decision for Marquis Dingbei, the emperor drove their family out of Zindu, out of sight. Mrs. Dingbei Ho thought about the barren poverty in the southwest and the year-round wind and sand. She could no longer hold on and completely fainted. Don't ever think about turning over in this life. At the Earl's mansion, Li Laoer, Luz Haiheng, Jian, and Ji Yin gathered together to discuss this matter. Li Laoer couldn't help but sigh. I was still worried when the Marquis entrusted the dock military camp to Daong. After all, Daong was a scholar, and he was more than smart but not ruthless. I didn't expect Daong to be so decisive. He killed Dingbei and didn't even accept the imperial edict. It's really. He searched for a long time and didn't know how to describe it. Luz Haiheng, on the other hand, was full of admiration and responded, Brother Daong is really domineering. When I have the opportunity in the future, I will definitely have a good drink with him. Jian also responded, yes, Marquis Dingbei is plotting against our family. We have always been worried about the person in the palace and it is difficult to take action. I didn't expect that I would die in the hands of Uncle Daong. Jian was moved in her heart. If it were normal days, Uncle Daong would definitely not kill Xinting Hao. This time, Xinting Hao took the initiative to send her to the door, and secondly, he was venting his anger on her, so he killed her. How could she not be happy to be loved and protected by her family in this way? Both docks are now in our hands. The one in the palace is probably going crazy. The reason he took the initiative to make excuses to cover up must be because he is waiting for news from the north. A cold look flashed in Ji Yin's eyes. If something happens to my adoptive father and my father, it will be a drain on our family. When the time comes, that person will definitely take action. Everyone nodded and couldn't help but think about the war at the border. At this time, Ji Yi and Lu Yang actually came back. Everyone was happy. Mrs. Li also rushed over, and the yard suddenly became lively. Originally, the two of them did not get off the boat because they did not want to intensify the conflict and completely break up with the man in the palace. But now, when people take the initiative to make excuses, they are not polite. Go home and have a meal. As soon as the good news came out, the food was arranged. All the maids and women got busy, and hundreds of people on the ship also sent food over. At the distant Jiangbei border gate, Muju hurried back to the military camp. The first thing he did was to rush into the commander's tent and drink all the cold water in the pot in one breath. Phew, I'm so thirsty, Muju wiped the water droplets from his mouth. He was out for a few days and couldn't eat or sleep well. He looked very haggard, but his eyes were as bright as the stars in the sky. Li Laozi stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. After looking at him, he asked, "Are you injured?" "No," Muju replied with a ruthless smile, "it's not a head-on battle, it's just to get some information when it comes to escaping, no one is better than me." Zhang Cheng came in from outside and greeted, "I just guessed that guard Mu was coming back tonight. I have already asked the back camp to prepare food and drink, which will be delivered shortly." Muju thanked him and walked to the marquee. The marquee was looking at the map. Muju pointed to a place and said, "Master Marquis, the investigation is clear. The barbarian reinforcements have gathered here, and there are only more than 2,000 people. And they have just arrived, and they are exhausted. If we attack, we will not be able to attack today. Late is the best time." Li Laozi and Zhang Cheng both came to the table and looked at that position. Zhang Cheng frowned and said, "Master Ho, this location is too open. If you want to sneak past it, you won't be able to see it." The Marquis nodded and moved his fingers to the hills nearby, "Detour for 50 miles, pass through this valley, and quietly go behind the barbarians' temporary camp. At that time, use the firecrackers as a signal, attack from both front and rear, and completely encircle and suppress them." Li Laozi clapped his hands and nodded excitedly. "This is a good method. It can catch you by surprise, attack from both sides, and keep even a single barbarian from escaping." Muju also nodded, looking at the Marquis with admiration in his eyes. The Marquis thought about it carefully and felt that nothing was missing, so he said, "This time I will lead the 3,000 vanguard troops to make a detour, and the fourth child will stay at the border." Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1187. Chapter 1187 is full of blood. Li Laozi was anxious at that time. "No, Lord Marquis. The vanguard army has always been under my control. Besides, you are the commander-in-chief, so naturally you have to be in charge of the border." The Marquis frowned and argued, "A detour and sneak attack is the key to this decisive battle. I won't worry if I don't lead the troops." Li Laozi strongly disagreed, "No, I'll lead the troops. I will definitely be more careful." The two had differences for the first time, and neither could convince the other. At this time, Zhang Cheng suggested with a helpless smile, "Master Marquis, 4 generals, why don't you all lead the troops to make a detour together? Leave this place to me at the border, isn't it just a matter of dispatching troops upon orders? I will definitely be able to do the job. If something goes wrong, Chizi, I'll see you in person. Besides, we are about to win a victory and triumph. Even though I have the title of general, I have never led troops to the battlefield even once. It's really embarrassing to say that. Just think that I am taking the credit and give me some of the errands." At this point, it seems that it's really hard to refuse. Li Laozi and Mr. Ho looked at each other, hesitated for a moment, and then both nodded. At this point, the strategy of detouring through the valley and enveloping and attacking has been decided. In order to keep it secret, the Marquis did not tell anyone. He just walked around the border with his soldiers and checked the defense. The 3,000 pioneers had enough to eat and drink, and the horses were fed. As soon as it got dark, they left the border pass under the leadership of Marquis and Li Laosi. Muju led several scout teams and set out early to explore the road ahead. Zhang Cheng stood on the city wall, looking at the retreating team with a somewhat incomprehensible expression. An offended general came over and said, "General, the brothers in charge of patrol have given instructions, and no one will reveal that the Marquis has sent troops." Zhang Chen nodded and responded in a low voice, "This dispatch of troops is extremely confidential, and it is related to the outcome of the final battle. We must not leak the information, and we must hide it for a day no matter what, or we will ruin the arrangements of the Marquis." The deputy general was really curious and asked, "The Marquis personally led the vanguard battalion this time. I don't know how to arrange it. I must be able to kill all the barbarians, and I will save worry in the future." Zhang Chen glared and scolded, "Stop asking about things you shouldn't know. When the war starts, just try your best to swing your sword." After saying that, he went down from the tower. The lieutenant who stayed behind didn't care and walked a few steps away with a smile. Besides, the vanguard army wrapped their horses' hooves and quietly circled the hill. When we arrived at the valley, it was already midnight. The Marquis ordered everyone to rest where they were and prepare to march quickly after crossing the valley, trying to get behind the barbarians as early as possible and start an encirclement battle immediately. At a quarter of an hour in the evening, there is a risk of being discovered by barbarians and ruining the plan. Muju and his men had already circled the hills on both sides of the valley and rushed back after making sure there was no danger. "Master Ho, there is no problem on the mountain, you can pass with confidence." The Marquis gave Muju the water bag and dry food in his hand, and then looked at the valley with his eyes still deep. I don't know if it was because of this final battle that he was too nervous. Why does he always feel that the dark valley is like the mouth of a giant beast, just waiting to swallow up his team? Li Laosi choked on his dry food, drank a few sips of water, finally recovered, and cursed in a low voice, "Hurry up and finish this battle, let's go home. It's really not a human life, I can't even dream of at-home meals." Muju also smiled and said, "Yes, the princess has thought about a new dish called cold noodles. It has sweet and sour soup, smooth noodles, served with soy sauce, sliced pork, cucumber shreds, spicy cabbage, and large vegetables. The handful of sesame seeds are simply delicious and appetizing, a great tool for relieving the heat." The threshold of cyclamen was almost stepped down by diners, who all came to eat cold noodles. Other restaurants also imitated it, but unfortunately the taste is far worse than ours. Everyone laughed when they heard this, even the Marquis raised the corners of his mouth. "When it comes to cooking, there may be many people in the world who are better than me, but when it comes to novelty, no one can match it." After resting for 2/4 of an hour, everyone got up and prepared to pass through the valley. Before setting off, the Marquis gave an order, "Divide into 2 teams, the front and rear, and the fourth will lead the people through first. After you pass, I will lead the rear team and then enter the valley." Li Laosi wanted to say that it was too troublesome, but the soldiers were nearby, so he couldn't refute, so he took half of the men and left first. The valley is not long, only about 5 or 6 miles. In just 2/4 of an hour, the tail of the front team was about to leave the valley. Seeing that there was indeed no problem, the Marquis led the rear team and quickly rushed into the valley. But halfway through, the originally quiet hills on both sides suddenly lit up with countless torches. The horses of the Northern Expeditionary Army were frightened, sneezing, and extremely agitated. Before anyone could react, countless large and small rocks rolled down the mountain, making a rumble and thunderous force. Enemy attack, everyone shouted. The Marquis drew out his sword and gave an order loudly. "Climb up the hill on the left, don't run away, don't lose your position." The vanguard army has experienced hundreds of battles, and the soldiers are not cowards. They were just attacked suddenly and were in chaos for a while. Hearing the command from the coach, everyone rushed towards the hill on the left. Stones, big and small, were rolled down so as not to hit the horses or soldiers. But it's still safer than being beaten to pulp in a valley. Soldiers were knocked down one after another, and the horses were neighing. But the enemy is on the mountain, and only by climbing up can the defeat be reversed. The Marquis took the lead and rushed to the top of the mountain. As expected, there were hundreds of barbarians pushing stones. When they saw the Northern Expeditionary Army coming up, they also pulled out their sabers and rushed forward screaming. For a time, the two parties were fighting together. Li Laozi originally led half of the vanguard army and had already passed the valley. He was about to explore the road ahead when he heard the movement and was startled. The valley that was supposed to be quiet has become a place of blood and fire in the blink of an eye. Master Ho! Li Laozi was so shocked that his eyes were splitting. He turned his horse's head and led people to rescue him. After all, he has been in the army for many years and has not yet been overwhelmed by anger. He led half of the vanguard army directly up the hillside. Only by defeating the enemies on the top of the hill could he save most of the soldiers halfway down the hillside. In the dark night, the sounds of shouts, horses neighing, and the clash of swords and guns were mixed together, full of the smell of blood. When the sky was getting slightly brighter, the battle finally came to an end. The remaining troops on the top of the hill were all the Northern Expeditionary Army, and almost all the barbarians who made a sneak attack were killed. Of course, the losses of the Northern Expeditionary Army were not small. At least half of the war horses were dead, and even among those who were alive, many had broken legs and were wailing. Of the 3,000 Northern Expeditionary Army, 500 were killed and 700 to 800 wounded, and their combat strength was almost reduced by half. This is still divided into two teams, front and rear, entering the valley. If they pass through together, I am afraid that not even 300 or 400 of them will be left intact. That is the Marquis, who had a hole in his thigh with a spear. Li Laozi was heartbroken and regretted that he had led the front team and left the danger to the Marquis. Muju's face was even more pale. He had obviously led people to investigate, and there was no ambush on the top of the mountain. Why did the barbarians suddenly appear? Did the barbarians already know the news and lurk behind the mountain, just waiting for him to investigate and then come up? Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1188. Chapter 1188. The Imperial Edict has arrived. This hill is a barren hill, without any vegetation, only endless stones, but it is a natural ambush place. Master Marquis, do you want to contact the border for reinforcements and go back first? Based on Li Laozi's thoughts, he wanted to seek revenge on the barbarians immediately, but the situation was unbearable, so it was better to be safe at this time. There were soldiers cleaning the wounds and applying medicine to the Marquis. The Marquis seemed not to know the pain at all. He looked down the mountain and suddenly said, "It's too late. Gather the corpses of our brothers immediately, collect the wounded and dead horses, and prepare to defend to the death." Li Laozi and Muju were a little confused when they heard this, but they turned their heads and looked into the distance, and their expressions suddenly changed. Tens of thousands of barbarians riding war horses galloped from the grassland like the wind and quickly surrounded the hill. It was originally scheduled to be a flanking and siege battle, but as soon as we left the border, someone made dumplings. Muju couldn't believe it even more. "I've checked many times and found that the barbarian reinforcements were only 2,000 people. Where did this come from?" No one answered for a long time, because the vaguely guessed truth was too shocking and no one wanted to believe it. In the end, it was the Marquis who spoke. "The barbarians must have gotten the news a long time ago and deliberately hid the number of reinforcements. Only 2,000 people were released to confuse us. And these 2,000 people were enough to lay an ambush here, and the rest of the large group finally showed up. This is a dilemma where they must win and we must die. Who leaked the news? Muju gritted his teeth with hatred, holding the handle of the knife in his right hand, looking for someone to take revenge at any time. Li Laosi looked at the vague towering border gate in the distance with a complicated expression. Do you still need to ask? We will go around the valley and rush behind the barbarians to attack from both sides. Only you, me, the Marquis and Zhang Chen know about this arrangement. Now the three of us are all aware of it here, the remaining one is naturally the traitor. Before Muju could respond, an injured captain shouted, Impossible. General Zhang has been with the Marquis for many years. He has taken care of the food, drink, and diarrhea in our entire military camp, and he has never made any mistakes. I was injured before and didn't have enough medicine for my injuries. It was General Zhang who gave me all the good medicine he brought from home. I don't believe it, such a good general, impossible. Other soldiers also looked suspicious and surprised. Li Laosi pulled up his clothes, wiped off the blood on the knife, and replied, It's easy to tell whether he is a traitor or not. We were attacked here, and the fight was so lively. He didn't send reinforcements. It can be said that it was too dark. Afraid of falling into a barbarian trap. But it was completely dark soon when we agreed to attack from both sides. There were no firecrackers as a signal. Instead, barbarians besieged the place. Even fools knew that we were in danger. Let's see what happens to him when the time comes. If he still doesn't send troops, then don't give up hope. He is a traitor. A traitor who has access to foreign countries, betrayed our marching route, and helped the barbarians hide reinforcements. Even if there were still people who wanted to speak, they shut up after hearing these words. Yes, facts are the best proof. Everyone was assigned tasks. Those who buried the brothers' bodies, those who handled the horses, those who patrolled and guarded, and those who treated the wounded were all busy. But no matter what they were busy with, everyone's eyes were unconsciously looking at the border. No one noticed that Muju quietly hid his figure and disappeared on the top of the mountain. The barbarians at the foot of the mountain are gathering more and more, but the border gate is like a sleeping giant beast, without any movement. Until the barbarians were preparing to attack the mountain, everyone's grief and anger also broke out. Zhang Chen, a dog thief. Brothers of more than 10 years, who have been through life and death, actually betrayed us. This thief, I will definitely chop him into pieces when I get back. I didn't die in the hands of the barbarians, but I was going to die in the hands of my own people. What a joke. Not to mention that everyone hates and curses, but in the border passes, many generals are also making a lot of noise. How come the vanguard army was attacked in the valley? Yes, what plan has the Marquis made? Where is General Zhang? Tell us quickly. We must quickly reinforce the vanguard army. We should have sent out troops last night. There was so much noise. How could something not happen? Facing the criticism, complaints, and anxiety from everyone, Zhang Chen, who was sitting in the main seat, remained silent. It wasn't until everyone felt something was wrong and all looked at him that he stood up and slowly stepped aside. At this time, an old slowly came out from behind the screen, accompanied by 2 imperial guards. Is this someone from the palace? Everyone was stunned. They didn't know when someone from Zindu arrived and entered the military camp. Zhang Cheng saluted respectfully, and the old slowly took out the imperial edict and shouted loudly, all officers and men of the Northern Expeditionary Army accept the edict. Everyone hesitated for a moment and knelt down. Zhang Cheng also knelt down, and the corners of his mouth turned up in a strange arc. Muju sneaked into the border camp and saw the soldiers looking strange and whispering, so he guessed that something had changed. Sure enough, he found a general he was most familiar with, and he was secretly dragged into the camp without waiting for a word. Guard Mu, how are you doing, Lord Marquis? We are dying of panic. Are we under attack? What are the casualties? Muju recounted what happened last night. The general stomped his feet angrily. I'm telling you, that kid Zhang Cheng is not a good thing. Just now we all went to rescue the Marquis, but he ushered in the eunuchs from Zindu, and the emperor issued a secret decree. The entire Northern Expeditionary Army is under the control of Zhang Cheng, and we are required to guard the border and not allow anyone to leave. This obviously means that we will watch the Marquis being bullied by the barbarians. We are just going to discuss it together and see how we can proceed. Muju thought for a while and said, now that the imperial edict has been issued, you are sending troops to resist the edict. The price is too high? Just wait, I will go back and report to the Marquis. If the Marquis has arrangements, I will come over to deliver the message. If there is no arrangement, you should stand still and wait for the opportunity. Okay, I'll go and tell everyone that the Marquis is safe and sound, the general responded. The two quickly separated and acted independently. In just an hour, Muju returned to Gus Han. More than 10,000 barbarians surrounded Gus Han like an iron barrel, but they could only stop the ordinary soldiers, but not him. Li Laozi had long since discovered that Muju was missing, and finally looked forward to his return, so he held a 10,000th of hope and asked, how is the border? Muju couldn't bear it, but still shook his head. Zhang Cheng took the eunuchs from the palace, took the imperial edict, and took over the border. No one was allowed to leave the border. The light in Li Laozi's eyes was completely extinguished. At that time, the whole village came out of the mountains and was chased by barbarians outside the dock. Fortunately, the Marquis rescued them in time, but Zhang Cheng also had help. Since then, Zhang Cheng has been with the Marquis. He and Li Daong enlisted in the army, and Zhang Cheng also took care of them. And every time Su Jintan gave them something, it was always more than Zhang Cheng's share. It can be said that Zhang Cheng is just not named Li, and the rest are no different from the Li family. Anyone can betray, except Zhang Cheng. But now that the facts are in front of us, why? Li Laozi couldn't figure it out, so he picked up the big stone next to him and threw it down the mountain. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1189. Chapter 1189. Believe me, wait for me. On the contrary, the Marquis looked calm. Before the traitor was found, everyone seemed a little suspicious. Now, although he is sad, he is much more at ease. He paused for a moment and asked, what did the other generals say? Muju responded, they originally wanted to resist the decree and lead troops out of the border for rescue. But I stopped them. After all, resisting the decree will definitely lead to being labeled as a rebel. They all have relatives in Xin. The Marquis nodded, you are doing the right thing. Don't let them get involved unless you have to. Zhang Cheng's betrayal and imperial decree to seize power are all aimed at me. I originally thought that no matter how jealous my great achievements were, the emperor would always put Tianwu's safety first. He would not take action until I finished this last battle, completely destroyed the barbarian cavalry, and ensured Tianwu's peace for 20 years. Unexpectedly, he didn't even want to wait for a few days. It also caused 3,000 vanguard brothers to follow me and fall into danger. No, don't say that, Lord Marquis. The other soldiers heard this and shouted one after another. We are the soldiers of the Marquis, the invincible Northern Expeditionary Army. At any time, we are willing to follow the Marquis and fight to the end. Besides, there are only 10,000 people at the foot of the mountain, not 100,000, so we are not afraid. With a few charges, we can break through the siege. That's right, it's just our defeated generals. With such morale, the Marquis and everyone are naturally happy. The barbarians at the foot of the mountain didn't know what to plan and had been holding back their troops. This gave everyone time to discuss countermeasures. Li Laozi watched the soldiers busy and sighed, I originally thought that after the last battle and the barbarians were wiped out, I would take the brothers back to Jiangnan and reunite them with their relatives. Now, it's so dangerous, I'm afraid. The Marquis also frowned. It was too difficult to successfully break through the barbarian siege without using the Northern Expeditionary Army at the border and to protect the soldiers around him as much as possible. Li Laozi wandered around and finally said, Master Marquis, let's contact the border to send troops. At that time, if the court labels them for resisting the imperial decree and being disrespectful, we will take them south. Maybe when they get overseas, you can build your own country. Muju was excited when he heard this and said, I think so too. If we could find a place like the Kingdom of the Golden Buddha, it wouldn't be difficult to become the king directly. The Marquis stood up, looked at the border, shook his head and said, No, the soldiers all have parents and relatives. If they leave with us, their parents and relatives will definitely suffer. Moreover, it is difficult to leave our homeland, and no one is willing to go far away unless it is absolutely necessary. Li Laozi kicked the stone irritably and retorted, Master Marquis, this won't work, and that won't work either. Where can we find reinforcements? It's better to just kill them. Otherwise, if we are trapped in such a lonely mountain for a few days, it will be, if the barbarians don't attack, we will die of thirst and starvation. The Marquis tightened the white cloth strap around his injured leg, raised his sword, and said, I will lead my guards to find the weak points in the barbarian siege first, and we will rush out after dark. No, your leg is still hurt, I'll go too. Li Laozi stopped Mr. Ho and raised his feet to leave. Muju didn't want to, but he jumped up on the big rock, looked at the south of the Yangtze River, then jumped down and said, Master Marquis, we have reinforcements. After saying that, he carefully took out an envelope sewn with oil paper from his arms and handed it to the Marquis. When I came out, the princess gave me this. She asked me to give it to you when I was in desperate situation. I guess the time has come. The princess must have a way to save us. The Marquis opened the envelope, and there was only a piece of letter paper inside, with a sentence written on it. Trust me, wait for me. Li Laozi was impatient and came over to take a look. He felt a little mixed in his heart. The daughter has some magical abilities, and he knows it. However, of the more than 2,000 vanguard troops, half of whom were injured, they were besieged by tens of thousands of enemies without any reinforcements. Even if my daughter were a descended to earth, I'm afraid she wouldn't be able to save all these people. Muju didn't care what they did, turned around and ran away without saying a word. 4 days, wait for me for 4 days. I will take care of bringing the princess. Li Laozi subconsciously stood up to stop him, come back, you come back first. But Muju had already reached the mountainside, and was even discovered by the barbarians, who shouted and raised their swords to intercept him. Muju was thinking about going home day and night, wondering how the girl who had captured all his thoughts could be stopped by the barbarians. With just one encounter, he defeated a barbarian, got out of the encirclement in twos and twos, and even snatched 2 war horses. Ride one horse and prepare another horse. On the top of the mountain, Mr. Ho, Li Laozi, and others saw Muju's figure disappearing little by little, and they didn't know what to say. Nonsense, Li Laozi yelled angrily, why would you let Fu Niuer do this in such a dangerous place? This kid Muju is too unstable, and Fu Niuer must not be allowed to marry him in the future. It's a pity that Muju couldn't hear the threat at all. Let's not talk about how the Marquis and Li Laozi organized their troops to hold on to the lonely mountain. Just talking about Zindu, although the royal family took the initiative to pull the fig leaf to cover up the Li family's boldness, every household still felt the tension in the air. Mutual temptations for the purpose of marrying men and women are still waiting, and dandies are still being imprisoned. Pedestrians going in and out of the street subconsciously stood on tiptoe and did not dare to raise their voices. The whole city is like the calm before an earthquake. At some point, maybe just because someone throws a fruit core, the mountains and the earth will immediately collapse and the world will be turned upside down. The same is true for outsiders. Earl's Mansion and Broken Gold Beach are naturally at the forefront, and they are more nervous and cautious. The slaves in the Earl's Mansion are all those who have bought out the life and death contracts. They have no relatives, only their masters. All honors and disgrace are naturally tied to the host family. So, there is no need to ask at all, just take them all with you when you go south. But Broken Gold Beach failed. It was not that the villagers were not loyal or united enough, but that there were simply too many elderly people. Since they traveled across the mountains and ridges to their new home, they have reclaimed wasteland, built houses, dug hot springs, and planted fruits. They have re-established their roots here. For them, Quanzhou is very good, but if they want to pull out the roots again, they have no strength. The village chief took the name book and gathered all the remaining people, old and young, and asked them one by one whether they wanted to stay or leave. An old man took the village chief's arm and sighed, "Brother, we know that the princess and uncle have good intentions and don't want us to stay and be bullied. But we are old and we really don't want to move anymore. And even if we go to the south, there is no other use than dragging the children down. We might as well stay and look after the Broken Gold Beach for the master's family." "Yes, brother. We really don't want to leave, so we stay here to look after the house. Things are changing, and maybe the master will come back sometime," another old lady also said. "When the time comes, we can't let our master look at the weeds all over the mountains. Let's stay here, do some rough work, and be buried here when we die, so that we can feel at ease." The other elderly people also nodded, obviously having the same plan. Today's update is here. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1190. Chapter 1190 Savin Who. It was Uncle Zhao who persuaded these old friends with a few jokes. "You are so lazy, don't regret it. We are going to the south, and we haven't seen a sea fish as big as a house yet. I am worried about it, and I won't be reconciled even if I see the Lord of Hell. That's right, I want to go out to see what the place where those yellow-haired people live is like." The fourth young master said that there is a famous wine made from grapes overseas. I want to try it. It is definitely not as good as the wine made by the princess. When they said this, the originally sad parting became lively. The village chief sighed quietly and wrote something in the name book. At this time, Granny Lin and other maids and women also came over. Granny Lin took the lead and said, "Village chief, could you please tell the princess and the old lady that we don't want to go south either? We will guard the old house and the princess's mansion for the master and make sure they are cleaned every day." "Wait. Let the masters return soon." This is beyond the village chief's expectation. After all, the little maids are not very old. He thought for a moment and then responded, "When I ask the princess and the old lady what they want, I'm afraid they don't want you to stay here." Mama Lin responded with a smile. When it gets dark, the Earl's mansion is lit with lanterns all over the courtyard. Mrs. Li and Mr. Li brought 3 brothers and sisters, Ji, Jian and Jian, to sit around. Mrs. Li saw a dish of braised pork and beans stewed on the table, and said, "Lu Yang won't be able to come back on the boat. Ji will remember to bring him a plate back later. The kid loves this dish." "I know." Grandma Ji took a big bite of the sweet food and responded vaguely, "My sister has remembered it a long time ago and stewed an extra portion in the pot." Jian added smoothly, "I asked Bai Yunjian to make a lot of ice cream, and I think it will be delivered to the ship by now. Bai Yunjian is not open for business, but Chen 11 and others can't sit still. They are thinking about new products every day, and the front and back of the store are even cleaned. They were so happy that this was a bit of an errand. They worked hard all day and made sure the brothers from the south had a taste of their craftsmanship. Li Lauer asked, how many people from these shops followed south? Ji Yin responded, in order to keep it confidential, I only asked Chen 11, shopkeeper Peng and other masters and stewards. As I guessed, everyone must stay and guard the family business. Chen 11 said even more firmly, he didn't want everyone to forget the name of Bianjian. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. Although the Li family had a falling out with the man in the palace and had to retreat south, these servants were extremely loyal. They are not considering their future and safety. They want to stay here purely for the sake of their master's family's property. As he was talking, the village chief finally came back. Everyone quickly invited him to sit down, and the village chief was not polite. After eating and drinking, he took out a book and gave him the good news. Ji Yin also frowned after asking carefully. Unexpectedly, many people stayed behind. Having settled in Broken Gold Beach for more than 10 years, it has become a home that no one can leave. She thought for a while and could only say, let's respect everyone's wishes. I will ask the princess and the prince to take care of me. When the dining table was cleared, Ji Yi returned to the ship, and everyone dispersed. Since I have to go south at any time, I always need to pack up my important daily necessities in advance. Ji Yin took a bath, sat in front of the window and took an ivory comb, combing her long hair bit by bit. The night wind is a little cooler than during the day. There are not a single star in the sky. The golden full moon seems to be picked up by reaching out. Ji Yin was rarely naughty, so she stretched out her hand to try, but the moon was not picked off, but the little fox suddenly jumped into her arms. Sanjo, Ji Yin was pleasantly surprised. He originally planned to look for the little fox tomorrow, but he didn't expect it to come back on its own. The little fox had a little green snake in its mouth, and now it vomited on the table. The little green snake was forced to take the high-speed train, and its eyes were still painted with mosquito coils. The little fox wiggled its little nose, sniffing the fragrance of its master, and chirped happily. Ji Yin closed the window sash, hugged the little fox, picked up the little green snake and brought it into the space. The familiar environment made the little fox even more excited. As for the little green snake, he went crazy. Compared to wandering in the grass in the palace, this place is simply paradise. Even though I was hungry most of the time before, I didn't have to worry about being taken away and skinned alive, and I didn't have to hide. Ji Yin doesn't care about these two little guys and lets them move around freely for a while. She entered the room, spread out her pen and paper and started writing a letter. The list of people leaving and staying has been decided, and it's time to make arrangements. The villagers and fields and orchards of Sujintan, including the old house and the princess's mansion, were all given to the third princess to take care of, and the produce also belonged to her, which was regarded as hard work. The earl's mansion in the city is also among them. There is no shortage of manpower to take care of the house. The princess only needs to walk around occasionally. Bianjian has always been the princess's favorite, so naturally it must be left to her. The remaining hot pot restaurants, fruit and vegetable shops, cyclamen, and even Baiwan garden and pickle shops were entrusted to the prince. As a former chief executive, he was familiar with these businesses. Secondly, these business profits are so eye-catching that no one dares to covet them unless he, the future emperor, protects them. As for the Marquis mansion, the chief steward will follow him down south. He will serve the Marquis all his life. Wherever the Marquis is, he will be there. The properties of the Marquis mansion were few in Zindu, and all of them were sold for cash during this period. Most of the other industries are in other places. It was originally to facilitate the collection of intelligence from various places, but now it seems to be a really wise move. After writing the letter, sorting out the deeds for several shops, and packing them into their respective boxes, the good news is considered a major event. At this time, the little fox and the little green snake had had enough fun and had eaten, so they came over. The little green snake stole the egg and spread it on the table, lazily refusing to raise its head. However, the little fox did not forget his errand and began to chirp to report. Jian stroked its soft back fur, listened carefully, and occasionally gave some instructions until the little fox kept nodding. In the middle of the night, the entire palace was dark, with only a few places lighting up. The prince's Zilong pavilion was one of them. Eunuch Feng pulled up his sleeves and yawned secretly. Then he looked at the prince, who was looking through the memorial. He felt a little depressed when he thought about the days ahead. The prince has been so diligent before he ascends the throne. If he becomes an emperor in the future, he will probably have to work even harder. As a personal eunuch, wouldn't he have to sleep standing up every night? The job that everyone thinks is a good job and the job that everyone envies is actually a hard job. He was worried about his lack of bright future, when a white shadow came through the window next to him, shocking him, and suddenly he woke up. The prince put down his pen, greeted the little fox with a smile, held him in his arms and teased him for a while. The little fox ran a long way and yawned when he was tired. The prince immediately ordered him to rest. Eunuch Feng burst into tears of gratitude and almost enshrined the little fox as his ancestor, worshipping him every day. This is the life-saving Grace Fox. Today's update is here. End of this chapter.